Okay, so I hope everybody can hear me, and I'm going to start, and I'm going to welcome you all. I'm going to start by wishing you all Happy New Year. I hope that 2022 is a great year for all of us, and certainly I hope it's a better year than 2021 in terms of COVID. So Happy New Year, everybody. Glad to have you here with us. And I'm Pádraig Berry. For those of you who don't know me, I am the CEO of TTI Success Insights here in Ireland. And on behalf of Caroline Smith and myself, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, The Science of Self. So what are psychometrics, how do we use them, how do you get certified in them, and so on and so forth. So everyone is muted and everyone's video is off. And if you have questions, please use the chat box. And just to make sure everything's working, I'd appreciate if you'd all just pop into the chat box now, just say, yep, I hear you, or something, just so we make sure that everything is working at the other end. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, put them in the chat box. Caroline will moderate the chat box as we go through. If she thinks there's anything really useful to introduce as we're doing the presentation, the webinar, then she will introduce it at that time. Otherwise, she'd hold them to the end and she'll ask the questions at the end. Now, I hope you all received the handouts that we sent them all out to everybody who registered. And the idea, great, I see everybody saying hello. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, you receive the handouts, and so you can follow along. And I think it's useful to have it allow you to do your own notes and do whatever. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with Caroline, and I'm going to introduce her. Say hello, Caroline, and I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Pádraig. I'm delighted to be here today, and welcome to everybody. So my name is Caroline Smith, and I'm an elite value growth consultant working with teams to enhance the value of their organizations through the endeavor of supreme teamwork. And what the psychometric assessments do for me and my business is it helps to open up the individual to be ready to participate fully in the team environment. I'm a coach with the International Coaching Federation. I have the ACC credential, and my background is in professional services and in public sector advisory roles in the area of corporate restructuring and insolvency. So thank you, Pádraig.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. So good to have you here, Caroline, and thank you for being with me. Caroline is an associate of mine, does a lot of work with us, and we find it very useful when we do webinars to have at least two people on them, as opposed to just one people. You're the talking head, and with the two people, it makes it more interactive. But it also allows us to actually show differences. A lot of what we talk about is our area. Obviously, we want to show differences. So our objective today is to give you an understanding of what psychometrics are, how you can use them, how you can get trained in them, and so on and so forth. So I want to start by asking you, I'm going to ask you a question, Caroline, if that's okay. I'm going to use you as my, okay. So the question I want to ask you, Caroline, is when you think of the word measurement, what do you understand? When you think of that, what do you understand by the word measurement? I know it's a strange question, but top of your head, what are the things that pop into your head?
And so it's benchmarking. You're measuring against something. It could be that you're trying to achieve a grade or a result or a particular measurement.
And why do you think we'd measure? Like, what? Okay, to get what? Okay, to measure and see how we compare to a grade. Why else?
To potentially achieve a standard. Yeah. Okay,
that's good enough. Okay, so we measure to get data, right? So we want to get data to get a clearer picture of something so we can compare things, so that we can change or improve something, or to help us make decisions. There's a purpose to measure. We rarely measure without a purpose. So I think that when we think of measurement, though, the key thing here, and I'm going to labor this point just a little bit at the beginning of this webinar, because to me, this is the critical issue. And when we measure something, the measurement that we take must be specific to the need, and it must be accurate and reliable. So it must be the appropriate measure for what we're trying to measure, and it must be accurate and it must be reliable. I mean, for example, we're currently in that funniest of times called the New Year's resolution time. Have you any New Year's resolutions, Caroline?
I do actually, yeah. This year, health is the priority. So before anything else starts in my day, I need to get exercise and some meditation.
Okay, well, that's perfect. I'm really glad to hear that. That segues beautifully into what I want to say next. And I was going to say, because I didn't know you were going to say that if you're like 90% of the population, at some time in their lives, they decide to lose weight, to get fit again, to get into shape. And if you're one of those people, saying you're around 60 kilos may make you feel good, but knowing you're actually 70 may help you actually take action and be the basis for action. I don't know, Caroline, if you've ever come across the famous Harvard Business School study that found that 3% of the population, i.e. the graduates of that class, that MBA class, who had their written goals, ended up earning 10 times as much as the other 97% put together just 10 years after graduation. I mean, did you ever hear of that study?
I have heard of it, and it's a while since I've read it, but there's nothing like having it written down and specific to help you stay on track.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, we can all argue, and we can see this certainly when we look at COVID today, cause the correlation is not causation. So for sure, but it's a pretty stark figure all the same, isn't it? I mean, so clearly, as you say, paying attention, like measuring something, accelerates performance. Now, but I want to just label the measurement for just one moment. Measurement is defined as comparing an unknown quantity, say your weight, to use our example, with a known or standard quantity, let's say kilos. So we're going to measure you in kilos. So it's the quantification of attributes of an object or an event. So we're quantifying attributes of an object or event, say weight in kilos, which can then be used to compare you with, for example, your target weight in kilos, or your recommended ideal weight in kilos for your gender and for your age, or your best friend's weight in kilos, if that's what you talk about. So this is really important. So we're looking for the ability to compare and contrast. And measurement really and truly is about being able to actually compare something. So you want to put a piece of timber into something, you measure the length, you measure its cost so it fits. In the world of psychometric assessments, we might talk about comparing people's behavioral styles, for example, or their values, what's important to them, or their skill set, and comparing them to each other, comparing them to a job, comparing them to a population norm, all using an agreed scale. So measurement is like really, really important. Now, in psychometric assessments, let's just talk about that for a moment as a measurement. So what do we understand by the word psychometric? Well, psychometric comes from two things, psycho and metric. Psycho is a Greek word for mental. Metric comes from the word meter, again, Latinized form of Greek to measure a length of something. So psychometrics are a field of study within psychology concerned with the theory and technique of measurement of mental attributes. So a psychometric, again, just to say it, it's a field of study within psychology concerned with the theory and technique of measurement of mental attributes. And it's generally referred to a specific field within psychology and education devoted to testing, measurement, assessment, and related activities. So assessments, psychometric assessments, are tests that are used to objectively measure an individual's personality traits, intelligence, abilities, behavior, style, aptitudes, whatever. And Caroline, you and I will know that psychometric researchers, a lot of them focus on the construction and validation of assessment instruments, like surveys, for example, scales, open or closed-ended questions, and so on. And I mean, you saw the webinar with Ron Bonstetter.
I did.
Yeah, you participated in it. And, you know, TTI is one of these companies who is focused on creating assessments. That's really what they do. And Dr. Ron Bonstetter, the Senior VP of Research with TTI, he did a wonderful seminar last September the 30th, on this area. And it's really amazing what you can do on that. And I'm just going to grab right now, for any of you who haven't seen it before, I'm just going to grab copy, if I can. Maybe I can't actually. And maybe you can do it, Caroline. I don't know if you can do it. And just pop it into the chat. The link to Ron Bonstetter's webinar was really, really interesting, showing the whole thing of measurement of the brain and how they can measure and how they can correlate it with the actual assessments themselves. So psychometrics and measurement. So Caroline, I'm going to let you run with this one. So let's look at yourself and myself and see what you have to say about us.
Yeah. So what's appearing on the screen there now is our motivation and behavior profiles, and they're two psychometric assessments. So we're using these measurement tools called driving forces and DISC, D-I-S-C. So we have scales that allow us to have a common language and to compare our profiles with each other. You know, for role requirements, they're compared to population norms, etc. And as you'll see, myself and Porrick have very different profiles. I know it's quite small on the screen, but we'll just show you these. So on our behaviors, how we like to do things, we use DISC, and they're the two profiles on the right-hand side with the red, yellow, green, and blue. And how we deal with problems and challenges. So I'm reflective, and you'll see that on the green line there, and on the red line to the left of the center at 93. So I'm reflective, outgoing, steady, and diplomatic. And on the other hand, Porrick's profile below that.
My wonderful profile, yes.
Yeah, your wonderful profile. We're very opposite, as people will see. Porrick is direct, outgoing, dynamic, and pioneering. So on the problem and challenges scales, we've very different behavior styles, and we come across quite differently, as you probably noticed throughout this webinar. And on why we engage or connect with what we value, the driving forces, that's the one on the graphs on the left-hand side there, closest to our photographs. The driving forces psychometric looks at knowledge, utility, surroundings, others, power, and methodologies. And my profile there says that I like to take control of my destiny by working with people and ideas to create new experiences. That's what engages me. That's what I value. Whereas Porrick, he also wants freedom and to control his own destiny. And we're both high in commanding, but he does it by working with people in ways that work to achieve a return on his time, energy, and his resources. So here we can see that the two psychometric measurements at work, allowing us to use an agreed scale to create a language of understanding and comparison and action.
Yeah, very good, Caroline. Thank you for that. So for what you look at, remember, we're not talking about kilos. We're talking about problems and challenges, people and contacts, pace and consistency, procedure and constraints on DISC, how we measure behaviors. And we're not talking about centimeters. We're talking about knowledge, utility, and so on values. So what we're doing here is we're using a scale, and we're measuring Caroline, or we're measuring me on these. We're just using these two scales as an example, but we're using these scales, these measurement tools, and now we can sort of look at ourselves. We have a common language. We can compare ourselves to each other. We can compare ourselves to jobs. We can compare ourselves to lots of things. And we'll talk about this, and this being the base of action and what we can actually do with this as we go forward. So let's have a quick talk, maybe just what about a quick, I don't know, introduction. This is sort of a whistle-stop tour, I suppose, but a quick introduction to what's out there. What's out there, are there differences between them? Are some better than others? And so on. And I suppose to start, I'd have to say that the answer to the first question of what's out there is there's a lot of psychometrics out there, too many to list, in fact. And I'm sure there's lots of ones that you've heard, that like the big five, MBTI, 16PF, DISC, EI, and so on. and there's ones that you personally prefer. So there's loads and loads of tools out there. And they're good tools, lots of good tools, great tools out there. TTI aren't the only one producing great tools. A lot of other great tools out there as well. But they're not all created equal. And this is really important. And I'm going to go back and talk about our measurement again and bring this into looking at these psychometrics now for a moment. It's important to understand why they're not all equal, the difference between a good and a bad psychometric. And remember what we said about measurement. We said measurement must be specific to the need and it must be accurate and reliable. So for example, there may be a relationship, even a strong one, between your waist measurement using a tape in centimeters and your weight on a weighing scale, say measured in kilos. But they're measuring different things and they shouldn't be confused. And let me give you an example. Let's say, Caroline, as part of your new campaign for 2022, you decide that you're going to take up intermittent fasting and you're going to only eat in an 8-hour block and you're going to do some cardiovascular exercise. You're going to go out and run or cycle or swim or something, and you're going to use some weights. All really great, a really comprehensive program, and you're ready to rock and roll. And your waist measurement may diminish as you lose water and fat initially, but your weight may not, because you're doing weights, you're doing things, you're putting on muscle, and muscle, as we know, is heavier than fat. So we must be precise in understanding of what assessment or what tool we should use to measure. And in the area of human performance improvement, for example, we look at the various dimensions of superior performance, and we say, what do we actually want to measure? And what tool are we using? And is actually measuring? We talk about reliability, we talk about validity. Validity is, are we actually measuring what we say we're measuring? And reliability is, can we consistently measure and get the same result? So these are really critical things. I'll talk about them in a moment when I talk about the difference between them. And you'll be surprised how often people use the wrong tools. They're measuring the wrong thing. So for example, imagine, Caroline, that you're looking at the weighing scales in kilos, the example I gave you a moment ago. Well, it mightn't move too much. And you might be pumping iron and working hard and really trying to get into shape, but nothing much is moving at the weighing scale. You might get disheartened and you might give up. When in fact, if you're measuring your waist in centimeters, you said, wow, or if you measure the ratio between your chest, your waist, and your bum, you said, wow, this is all really working. I'm toning up, I'm getting all the measurements right, and it would encourage you to make progress. So this also supports, by the way, the argument for a multi-science approach. So when you're actually looking at assessments, you use this idea of multi-science, like different assessments, and group them together. But as Trucker said many, many years ago, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So different tools are required for different metrics. One size does not fit all. So it's really important to think about this. Like, what are you using the tool for? Is this the right tool at all to use to measure, to get the outcome or result we want? That's one. Secondly, and really important, validity, reliability, and norming. So these are essential elements to keep in mind when you're determining the quality, I suppose, of any psychometric. For example, is there a peer review, third-party peer review accreditation going with a particular assessment that says it is valid, it's actually measuring what it's saying it's measuring? Two, it's reliable, it consistently measures what it says it's measuring. So we, for example, we have third-party, all our stuff is third-party peer-reviewed, and all this research is available in the public domain, and we're accredited by the American Psychological Association, or if you're, because obviously we're a US company, but if you're over here as well, typically people are accredited by the British Psychological Society. So, you know, this is really important. Keep this in mind. Are we using the right tool? What tool should we be using? What measurement should we be using? And then, is this measurement reliable? Is this measurement valid? And so on. Now, I said that one size does not fit all, and you're going to like what's coming up next, Caroline. And you should have a multi-size approach, a toolkit, if you will. So you have the right tool for the right task. So back to your New Year's resolution, getting fit and healthy. You're going to lose weight, you're going to get a shape, tone up your body, and all these wonderful things. Well, a scales would be important. So is a measuring tape, the ratio of chest to belly to bum. So is your BMI. And how far you can run, how fast you can run, the weights you can lift, how many reps can you do, how often you eat, what you eat, and so on. All different metrics, all additional data points that help you understand and move towards your goal. So clearly, one metric will not be sufficient to help you move forward. And if on that particular campaign, I would be recommending to you actually a number of different metrics that you would be recording every day on the top of your journal. How far you ran, your heart rate, monitoring things, look at the weighing scales, the measuring tape, and so on and so forth. So again, I'm using it as my example, Caroline. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, that's fine.
But it's working well for me at the moment. But here's another one. Here's an alternative. Imagine you're visiting the doctor, and the only tool that she has is a stethoscope, or a blood test, or an X-ray, or an MRI. Well, you actually want them all, don't you? You don't just want one. You want all these different metrics. You want the maximum number and the highest quality of appropriate assessments to get the most information to make an informed decision or diagnosis. And remember, like a full medical workup. And remember, prescription without adequate diagnosis is called malpractice. And you would be amazed the way people misuse psychometric assessments. They don't understand what they are. They're not measuring the right thing. They're comparing things the wrong way. They say, this tells me this. Well, it doesn't tell me that. Bill Bonser, the founder of TTI, I always remember when I first got involved in TTI way back in 1995, I think it was. And he used to always say, we must be specific. We must be precise about what we are measuring. And more importantly, what we're not measuring. And so it's really, really important when you think about psychometry, you think about all these, keep in mind, what are you trying to measure? What's the appropriate tool to measure it? And is that tool valid and is it reliable? So uses. I said a couple of times already that one size doesn't fit all. You should have a multi-science approach, a toolkit to help you. And so you can have the right tool for the right task, the right metric for the right things, the thing you want to accomplish. And so, for example, let's take recruitment, career guidance, coaching, development, matching a person's skills and abilities to a job, to succession planning. Think of all the various uses, all the different things that you want to do. And I don't know, Caroline, if you've got any examples you want to give here of your own experience of using psychometrics different ways for specific things.
Yeah, well, just one quick example comes to mind where, there was I was coaching somebody who was considered to be a high performer, but there was some underperformance had emerged, and the person had recently been moved from a role they were very competent in to a whole new business area, and it was considered to be a bit of a promotion. So we looked at what were the causes of the underperformance issues, and it was actually impacting this person's health as well. And it was when we did DISC, and we really went through DISC and driving forces, that my client actually said, I love working in this organization, but they've put me sitting in the wrong seat. So it was the person was not, their motivation was to be very, very, very detailed. Their preferred working style was quiet and precise and detail oriented, and a new business offering, a new service offering by the organization, where this person was expected to be in business development mode. It was a duck out of water and didn't suit the person at all. So that's it's
an excellent example, actually. And again, just think about this. Think about the talent. I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but think about the talent cycle, the cradle to grave talent cycle, and the application of the tool. Think about conceiving of a role. So you're thinking about a job, and you ask them the questions, well, what education does the person have? What experience is required for success in that role for superior performance? And then you say, well, then what else? So what else do we want to measure? So we want to measure competencies, skills. Do we want to measure values, what's important, what will engage or disengage the person, what will motivate them to move into action? Do we want to talk about a behavioral style, the way they communicate, the way they interact, the way they deal with problems and challenges and so on? What do we want to measure? And can we have specific tools that help us measure these specific things? And over the last 30 or 40 years, there's been a huge amount of development. in the application of psychometrics in the world of normal people. And their development is accelerating even now. And again, I mentioned Ron Bonstetter's webinar, where this brain imaging, what they can actually do right now, is really quite remarkable in looking at that. So let's give you an example of the uses. So we may want to be able to compare people to each other. So they have two people side by side, see what their position is on the wheel, what are their driving forces, potential conflicts between the individuals, what are their competencies, and what are their development needs. And so there's a whole plethora of different things that you can say, like that we might want to be able to identify with somebody and to help somebody, to work with somebody a different way. And so these are sort of applications and uses of these tools. Or for example, you might want to be able to compare people to a role, for example. So could we compare a number of people to roles? Can we see how they fit the roles? Can we come up with gap reports for them and compare them to role, build development plans around those gap reports, and so on and so forth? So these are the kind of applications and uses you can have for this. And for succession planning, can we, for example, benchmark the next role and compare the person to a couple of gap reports and come up with a development plan and so on, looking at things like behaviors, looking at things like values, driving forces, motivators, looking at things like competencies and skills. So looking at these kind of things, can we do this? Or can we look at something like behaviors and driving forces and EQ in a coaching environment around personal development and so on? So these are the kind of uses that you have when we talk about these. And again, this is this cradle to grave, this talent cycle. And we talk in TTI, we talk about the model of DEEP. And we talk about DEEP: discover, engage, advance, perform, revealing people's potential so they can release that potential and organizations can realize their potential. And right across this continuum. So we look at this continuum: discover, engage, advance, perform. So how do you discover talent? How do you engage that talent? How do you help them advance and develop? And how do you manage performance, build teams, and so on and so forth? So all these kind of things, they have the psychometric has specific applications in specific areas across this. And I mean, any other examples, Caroline, pop to mind for you, or applications?
Yeah, well, you know, the example I just gave there, wouldn't it have been wonderful if all of that had been known before the person was moved around internally within the organization? And you know, it's working with teams, and you and I have worked with teams, Porrick, where people get to know the motivations and driving forces and disc profiles of each other, and it can actually reduce the tension between individuals, and people can see each other as really valued teammates, rather than, you know, the frustrations of feeling that somebody is just getting in their way. Whereas in fact, if we understand each other a little bit more clearly, well, and you know, so
you know, Caroline, if what you're saying is actually on the button, and I always think of my example, the one I love to quote is: have you ever seen the person recruiting, and they're sitting there and they've got their hands like this, and they're resting their chin like this, and they're looking across the desk at the candidate, and they've got a pile of files here beside them. Do you know what they're doing? They're praying. And they're saying, "Oh Lord, let this one be right." But in truth, they haven't got a clue. And they're looking across, and they're trying to make an evaluation on an individual without understanding, for example, what the role is, what's required for superior performance of that role, and does this person match that role, for example. And then right through that, when they onboard them, how is that person going to work with their supervisor? How is that person going to work with the team? And then how do we identify gaps and build a development plan for this individual? And then how do we do succession planning and build bench strength? How do we compare them to other roles and build bench strength? How do team communications workshop? I mean, your example there, I know the specific team that we worked with recently that you're mentioning, and we did behaviors and driving forces in the first series of workshops, and then we did EQ in the second. And it's really quite phenomenal to see the change that takes place when people can understand and when they use these effectively. So the question then is, what assessments are available? And let's just talk about very, very quickly. And remember again, what we want is we want a toolkit so that every solution is not a hammer. You know, when we get back to Drucker, I mean, we want sufficient different kinds of sufficient assessments or psychometrics to allow us to use the appropriate ones in the appropriate places. So let's start. The first and probably the best known of them is DISC, and DISC measure is about behaviors. So this explores how we engage with the world, our behaviors, how we deal with problems and challenges, people and contexts, pace and consistency, and procedures and constraints. So it's about how do we behave, how do we communicate, and it's sort of it's a go-to tool that I think almost everybody is familiar with at this point. Here's one, Caroline, do you want to take us through this one?
Actually, Pork, I'm going to leave that with you if that's okay.
Okay, that's fair enough. So let's look at this one. And look at motivators. And the tool we have is driving forces. So it measures motivators. What engages or disengages you? Your why. What causes you to initiate action? Your behaviors. So you will recall I mentioned at the beginning, Caroline, when Caroline talked about her and my driving force, and we had some similarities and combinations of our top driving forces. But we value different things. We filter the world through different priorities. Different things are important to Caroline, to me. So can we understand that? And that's really, really important. It's quite different from understanding somebody's behaviors. So, you know, understanding, if you look at this for a moment, understanding how somebody does something is interesting. Understanding how Caroline, for example, and I would communicate is interesting. This is all really important stuff and helps us have a shared understanding, a shared language, so that we can become more effective and work more effectively together. But understanding this, understanding why we connect, why we disconnect, what's important to us, what we value, what engages and disengages us, this is critical. And it's critical across all sorts of relationships. I actually believe it's foundational to successful relationships. So I'm driven by return on investment, return on time, return on energy. Caroline is driven by a new experience and learning and new ideas and opening people up opportunities for people. We both want to be in charge of our own destiny, but you can see we value doing it different ways. We want to do it different ways. The third science I'm going to mention very, very quickly is skills or competencies. So exploring what have you been recognized for? What skills, and these are the top 25 we use here, the top 25 skills that are required for most roles. And these modify your behavior. So if we say your behaviors, your how isn't here in the core, they're initiated by your motivators, they're modified by your competencies, these skills that you've developed over time. The fourth science here is emotional quotient. So we're talking about emotional intelligence, and the tool we use is emotional quotient. Exploring, do we actively apply the principles of emotional intelligence? And, you know, and these are, of course, you know these areas. They are self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, social regulation, of course, intrinsic motivation. And I mean, Caroline, you'll remember the workshop we did recently where we actually talked about this thing with the floor of competence in other areas, that this, in fact, was the key differentiator between the top performers and let's call them the other performers. Any comments to make on that?
No, I'll leave that with you, Pork.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. I just thought you might have something, because, you know, it is a critical one, isn't it, Caroline? And it's interesting when you talk about leadership, particularly. I'm actually quite convinced the differentiator between the leaders and the led, and there are exceptions to this rule, of course. We can think of I won't mention any names, but the exceptions that prove the rules. But successful leaders are people who lead from character. They lead from who they are, not their position or what. They lead from who they are. And these people tend to have be very strong in the area of emotional intelligence, i.e. they actively apply. And by the way, just to make the point, this is something that can be developed. A lot of people talk about emotional intelligence and think it's something that's fixed. IQ can grow, EQ can grow. These are learned things. You can learn and you can develop them. And then just very quickly, Acumen Capacity Index, this is the final core science, and it talks about can we make balanced judgments and decisions? So can we see the world clearly? Can we see ourselves clearly, systemically, extrinsically, intrinsically? So we see things clearly, and as a consequence, can we make good decisions? Can we make good judgments? And if we don't see things clearly, if we see things, if we have a skewed view of the world and we don't see the world in a balanced way, we make bad decisions. And I actually, this is my red flag tool. It's my go-to assessment for all senior hires. So other assessments, of course, there's lots of other assessments in there. We have tools like target selling insights, stress quotient, 360 feedback, and a plethora of combinations of assessments. And you'll find almost all providers have different combinations. But I think this is something that's sort of unique to TTI. And I think there's something they do a particularly good job at, is the combination, the way you can combine assessments into different reports and do different things with them right across the talent cycle, as we mentioned earlier. One or two other things I just want to mention. I mentioned earlier a couple of times, I talked about exploring the job person match, the idea of benchmarking. This is a really important tool also in the TTI suite. And it's not a psychometric per se, it's more a process, if you wish, where you can identify the key accountabilities of the role, and based on that, identify what superior performance looks like in the role in terms of, let's say, behaviors, motivators, skills, acumen, capacity, and so on. You say, what would the success look like? What would a superior performer look like? And then you can measure people, candidates, and compare them to it, and put development plans in place and recruit the right people and develop the right people and do succession planning and so on. So these are like, again, important tools. And you can see here in development planning, exploring building competence. Another really important tool, if you wish, understanding and evaluating others and being able to build development plans for them for superior performance. Because ultimately, when we talk, if you think about this, we talk about performance evaluation. Performance evaluation should really be about building superior performance. And the question is, how does one build superior performance? So having these kind of tools, I think, is really, really helpful in that regard. I just want to show you a quick model here. The core sciences and how they work together. So first we talk about how. We talk about how do I do what I do, behaviors, and the tool we use is DISC. Why do what I do what I do, motivators, and the tool we use is driving forces. And they initiate action, they initiate behaviors. Then what skills do I have? We call this DNA. And these tend to modify these behaviors. And then do I practice? Am I active in the area of emotional intelligence, my EQ? And then if we sort of a platform or a foundation for the others, and then sort of an overarching, do I have the capacity? What's my potential, my acumen capacity index, my potential to make good decisions and good judgments? And you can see how these work together and how you use these together in different ways to achieve different outcomes as you work through. So this brings us to certification training. And I'm going to talk about these very, very quickly. We have 3 certification trainings, and you'll find everybody does this differently. But we have 3 different certification trainings. The first one is what we call trimetrics DNA, 3 sciences: behaviors, DISC, motivators, driving forces, and competencies, our DNA, these skills, DNA. And we also do things like benchmarking and other things in there. And that's the core training. Then once that is done, people can do EQ if they wish. So it's called trimetric EQ. They do emotional quotient as an assessment. And then they also link that in. We link it in with behaviors, and we link it in with driving force and show how the 3 of them work together. And then the last one we have is trimetrics HD, where we bring in acumen, capacity, ACI, and we link it in with the other sciences. So those are the trainings that we actually offer. And they all follow a similar format. And I'm going to just show you one very, very quickly so you have a sense of what it actually looks like. So this is the trimetrics DNA, the behaviors, motivators, and competencies. And typically there's a pre-learning where you go on an asynchronous learning, where you go online, you do your own learning yourself on an LMS learning management system. Then there's synchronous training where we do 5 4-hour Zoom sessions over 10 weeks. Again, the principles of place, pace, and price. I talk about these 3 Ps. So you do it at place, you're doing this at home. So you're online doing this at home, and even the workshops are online. And so even when we're doing the synchronous training, it's all done through Zoom, so you can do it from home. And everything is recorded, of course, so you can actually go back and review it and do things at a pace that suits you. So the partner debriefings. So we tend to have triads, where A debriefs B, debriefs C, debriefs A. So there's opportunity to have different experiences of actually debriefing the various assessments and having your own debrief. And we have check-ins, group check-ins once a week. And we have one-on-one coaching with the trainer for specific areas that you might want covered. And then we have certification exams in behaviours and driving forces in this particular training. And they're an important part of the learning as well, because we follow the 70-20-10 model, where we believe in the way adults learn is they learn by doing. So this is designed, if you wish, to support this concept of learning by doing. And if you actually just look at this, what I'm just popping up here on the screen for you, the elements, the assessments, the pre-learn, the Zoom-based training, debriefings, the group check-in, the exam, the one-on-one, the home learning assignments, and so on. It's all about adult learning, all about 70-20-10. 70% is what you do, 20% is feedback and interaction, and 10% is the teaching, if you wish, from the actual trainer. And there you see there again, we talk about time input, and we're saying to people like an hour a day for the duration. And again, just their Dropbox and ideas, just we have a lot of information in Dropbox and resource in Dropbox, and give people access to this. And there's a sample, quick sample of what a training session looks like and what assignments look like. And you should have the slides of this in the handout that I actually sent to you, so you can actually go in and have a quick look at this yourself if you are interested. And what you get, it's just really important to ask the question, like in the trimetric DNA certification, what you actually get. When you get the certification training, you come out at the end and you get, once you've successfully completed the exam, you come out and you are certified as a behavioral analyst, a motivational analyst, and so on. You get a deep understanding of the sciences. It's really, really important. And equally important, the interaction between them, how they all work together. And this is critical, so it is. So this enables you to use the tools in the appropriate way, the right measurement, the right tool in the right place to accomplish the right outcome. You get, of course, your own assessments. So you do all these sciences and you're debriefed and you're coached and you work through them. So this is a valuable learning. I'd be the cost of those assessments, just to give you an example. The cost assessment that you do in the training is more, if you were to buy them retail, it's more the actual price of the training. You get access to all our resources, and we have comprehensive resources available to you, including workshops and all sorts of tools and techniques and things that you can do. And they're all available to you. And of course, you have free access to our internet distribution system where you can create your own assessments and do your various work. And you get support on business development. We're really, really keen to support people and help people on the business development. The other training, trimetric EQ, to do that, you have to have done the trimetrics DNA first. It's an add-on training, and then to do Acumen Capacity Trimetrics HD, you have to have done trimetrics EQ. So it's just the order that we do them in, because you need to know these things before you can do axiology. You need to have done EQ. Before you do EQ, you need to have done the other ones, because we link them all in together. So that's sort of finished. So I'm going to close the screen share, and I'm going to go to you, Caroline. And I'm going to ask you what, if any, questions we have there in from individuals. Do you have anything you?
There isn't any question there, Padraig, but Tricia has put up a comment. Job benchmarking tools are excellent. They really help with both recruitment and also coaching people for succession planning. Really like the tools and the process prescribed.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks for that, Tricia. Let me make one comment, because it's a question actually that I'm often, even nobody's asked me this, but it's a question I'm often asked. And the question is around the training itself and the pricing of the training and then buying reports afterwards and so on. It's very, very simple. And we broke the training. It used to be one big training, and took many, many days, and people went to training and they left it exhausted. And it doesn't really work that way. So to learn the tools, to understand the psychometrics, understand how to use these tools in the appropriate way, you need time. It's all about practice. So we've redesigned all the trainings so they're done in a practical way, where you have the opportunity to practice, because practice makes permanent. It's only by doing it that you learn. So we broke the trainings up into 3 trainings: the core training, then the EQ, then the axiology. And you don't have to do the EQ or the axiology. You can just stick with the core training if you wish. It's done in the way I said. It's done with LMS, where you can learn it online yourself, and then you come to the Zoom sessions, and we have these Zoom sessions. Then you go in, you practice with somebody in the group. You'll have a partner or a number of partners to be practicing, doing the debriefing. And the idea of all of this process, this way of doing it, is that when you come to the end, you have confidence. You have the confidence to use the tools. Why? Because you have the competence. And you know you have the competence. Why? Because you've already done it under supervision a number of times during the trainings. That's really critical. So the second point I really want to make is this thing of pace. Everything is recorded. This webinar, for example, has been recorded. We record everything. So when you do something in a training, it's recorded and stored, and it's available to you. You can go back and look at it as many times you want. So this is really, really useful. And you'll find all the stuff in the Dropbox, all the notes are there, all the speaker notes, everything there is available to you. So you have that sort of forever. And that's really, really handy when you go back and say, actually, how do I do that again? Just go back and you look at that clip and how do I do this or how do I do that? And you find that very, very helpful. On the pricing of the training, the price of the training is very simple. It's €950 per training, €950 per training. This is a third of what it used to be. And it sort of reflects the new way of doing it, which is that we're doing it online, all that overhead, those costs aren't there. And so the pricing structure has been redone, I suppose, and also to make it accessible to people. And regarding the pricing and the commitment that one makes when one actually becomes trained or does a certification training, the commitment is you sign an associate agreement, which really is just an agreement saying I'm going to behave ethically. That's really all it is in this essence. And there's no requirement to buy any assessments. It's up to you whether you want to actually use the assessments or not. But assuming you do want to use the assessments, you get an invoice on the ones that you use as you use them. When you create a report at the end of that month, you'll be invoiced for that report. And you'll be invoiced when you start off, you'll be invoiced at 75% discount on the retail price. So you'll be paying 25% of the retail price for a particular assessment. So let's say, for example, trimetrics DNA. You'll be paying for that assessment, for example, 3 sciences, you pay €105, and that retails at 4 times at €420. Or talent insights, which is used by a lot of people, retails at €280, and you buy it for €70. So that's the pricing structure, and you get billed at the end of the month, and you pay your invoice when you get it, and that's it. There's no contract where you have to pay a fee to stay in the network for a year. You must recertify, but the recertification is free. And we tend to do about 3 or 4 recertification sessions a year, where you come online, we give you the latest updates, the latest developments that take place, that have taken place over the last quarter. Make sure you're up to speed. And one last comment is, everybody who's in the network is entitled to a support call every month. They're entitled to a half-an-hour support call every month. So if you need to catch up and you need support, you need help, you're not out there on your own. At no cost, you can actually call up and you can have a session where you tell you, this is what I'm trying to do. How do I do it? And we do this a lot. And obviously, we do a lot more with our active users than with the people who aren't active. But it is a facility that's there. Anything I've left out, Caroline, do you think I should have mentioned?
No, but I'd just like to echo what you said there about the availability of access to the recordings, because certainly when I started out with getting certified, it took a little bit of time then before I started buying any links at volume and working with clients, on a very regular basis using the tool, and I do so a lot more now. But it's just it's a wonderful resource to be able to go back in just to say, yeah, I've got this. I know exactly what I'm going to do with each of these and how I'm going to create the link for this client that I'm servicing. Yeah. Okay, well that's a wrap. So again, if anybody needs any more information on this, please feel free to reach out to Caroline or myself, and specifically around TTI training, reach out to me, and we will send you whatever information we can. This recording, again, you'll get a link, you'll get an email at some stage over the next day or two with a copy of this recording, so you have access to it if you want to use it or you want to review it or you want to share it. So that's sort of it. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate you being here today. Thanks, Caroline, for co-facilitating this with me. Appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.